Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Director and co-writer Klaudia Reynicke's slow burn family drama takes place during a time of political upheaval. It follows sisters Lucia and Aurora as they are preparing to permanently leave their native country, Peru, with their mom. But they need their absentee father, Carlos, to sign the exit papers. It's been convenient for Carlos to not be dad, but if he wants his daughter's love, he has to earn it back before they leave. It's a beautiful film. It's a wonderful character study, and it's subtle, it's understated, and it is powerful. It's about family, it is about political upheaval, it is about staying together and finding common ground. The film is called Queens or Reinas. Queens is also Switzerland's submission for this year's Oscar nomination consideration for Best International Feature. And we're joined today by the director and co-writer, Klaudia Reynicke. Klaudia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed the film for a lot of reasons. It does feel like a film that is personal, as well as kind of a bigger meta story about this time in Peru when there was a lot of political upheaval, but it also feels like something that's close to your heart. What inspired the film?
Well, I think, getting older and having lived like for so long away from the country I was born and I was raised until I was 10, because we left when I was 10 with my mom. I'm an only child. I needed to reconnect with this country. I've been telling everyone I'm Peruvian, and I truly feel my Peruvian roots. Uh, and somehow I've been living in Peru, more. I mean, I've been living out of Peru more than I had been living in. So I guess I was looking for, to reconnect with a country that I didn't know anymore that well, and it was not conscious. It's something that I have thought about, now that I've done the film. But there was this need, yeah, to go back to my roots and to go back to this childhood that was so far away. And so, yeah, I started creating a film, a story that was talking about a family that wasn't a family anymore. And the idea was to bring them back to become a family before a big separation, like we see, in the history of the world all the time.
I remember the period of time that's referred to in the film, although I wouldn't call it the thrust of the film in terms of the story being told. But I do remember the period of time when The Shining Path was a major disruptor in Peruvian society. And so it gives a kind of a context to the film about the sort of the threat to their family, the threat to their personal safety in some ways, which gives the film a certain layer, another layer of tension that as the story progresses. What was your thinking in terms of introducing that element into the story?
It was always part of the story because the country that I knew and that I had left was like that. I was raised with, the shining path in the background. I was raised with a country that was in a big conflict, that had inflation, that had problems, economic, and social, political problems and conflicts. So to me, if I was going to go back to Peru, I had to go back to that Peru because that's the only Peru that I actually knew. Now that I've done the film and that I went back to a Peru that has nothing to do with that Peru that I knew back then in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 90s, well, I've been able to discover my country as another country again. But to me, it was absolutely crucial to go back in time because I wasn't able to see myself, telling a story of a country that I barely know today, right? I could do it maybe today because I've been going back and, I have created a relationship with that country. But when I was writing Queens, that was not the case.
In terms of the story being told, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like this story is being told from the point of view of the two sisters, Lucia and Aurora. It's not quite, I don't know if I can say it's all from their point of view, but it feels like it's the intent of the film for to be told with from their perspective.
It was, I mean, the main idea, yes, was that the story was actually told from their point of view. But already we have two very different points of view because of the age. At 10 years old, this kid, Lucia, she all she wants is to be protected by her mom. And, she wants to be close to her mom. Her mom doesn't have any time for her right now. So, that's kind of like the thing that her drive, right? On the other side, we have Aurora, who's a 15-year-old girl, and all she wants is to hang out with her friend and the boyfriend. She doesn't care about going away from Peru. She doesn't want to, actually. So we already have two points of view that are very different. Of course, these are the kids. So little by little, when we were shooting the film, I gave also some space, and some weight to the mother and to the father because I thought, all right, we already have two points of view that are very different. I think it would be good for the story to also have a bit of the adult's point of view, which is why sometimes we just leave the kids and we are with the parents and we kind of like go through, go through like their lives and what's going on at that specific moment, like Elena in her job, having to handle, all the stuff that she needs to do, the visa and then Carlos in his own job, in his reality, in the fact that he definitely cannot leave this country, like probably 90% of the people or more of Lima that, were living in that time. Elena comes from a more privileged family and he doesn't. So it was important for me to, yes, have a good start with the girls, but also to give a way for the adults and their differences to actually come out in the story and to be underlined.
Yeah, and I really like that. Thank you for that answer because that's how it feels. It is, it's their story, the two daughters, the sisters, I should say,
Hmm.
and their story. The inclusion of Carlos and Elena in the story helps widen out the story. It helps broaden out the parameters of what the story is about. And
Hmm.
I have to tell you that I went back and forth on how I felt about Carlos, and I think that was intentional in the filmmaking. There's a high degree of uncertainty as to whether or not what he's saying is accurate or true. And over the course of the film, it depends on the situation. I like the ambiguity of his character. I think that helps. It just helps in the storytelling. It helps with kind of the dynamics of the story being told as well. Where with Elena,
Hmm.
um, you have someone who knows what she wants. She is determined to do this, not only for where she believes will be a better place for her and her children,
Hmm.
but so that adds to it. I don't want to give too much more about what drives her, but these are very interesting people. I guess what I'm trying to get to is you've given all of them dimension, and that I think really helps tell the story.
Yeah, I think it's important for me, to be always on some kind of gray line with shades and not to have, characters that are either black or white because I don't believe in them because, life is not made out of, people who are, good people and bad people. I believe that people can be, both. And that's what I try to build with all the characters that I work with in a project because I want us to love them, but also, to be able to understand that they have their flaws. And I think they all do, in this story. It's just normal. I mean, we all have our own flaws. And so Carlos obviously is the one that sticks out more because he hasn't been around, because he lies, because he wants to be loved, and he's ashamed of himself because he has nothing to give. And probably that is connected directly to a country that obviously is doing bad. He's the direct mirror of that country. And I would have to say that in a country like Peru, especially back then, a country that is very machist, I mean, it's not only women suffering out of it, but a person from Carlos that, there are many Carlos, I believe, in this world that get pointed at because they can't just take care of their wives or ex-wives because of many reasons that we can define. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to hide because, a man is supposed to take care of everything else. And if you don't, you're nothing. And I also wanted to point that out, the suffering of being another type of victim of a system. Obviously, Elena has this very pragmatical side that I really wanted to point that out. And she really does everything. She's had the kids by herself, all of her life. She's paid for everything. Now she found a job overseas and she's paying for everything. And, yet she doesn't get the credit for it. What she does for people is like kind of normal, right? So, we have all these little, gray shades everywhere that to me it's the most interesting part, getting the audience to actually be not 100% understanding what's going on, because it's nice to discover these characters.
I agree. I agree with you. It's fun. One of the characteristics of, I believe, Lucia, if I'm getting mixed up here, correct me, is she's the one who is invested with the secrets and she can't keep a secret. That's kind of a running thing, a running theme within the film is that she will blurt out what it is that she shouldn't have said, which I think that was a fun part of the film. And sometimes it wasn't so fun for the people involved, but yeah, you're describing, they're just interesting people. So that does certainly makes for a more complex film. Also, I like the depiction of family life in the film. I really enjoyed spending time with Elena's family, and
Hmm.
the secondary characters in the film are all very interesting. So just just a well-rounded film in that regard. I'm curious about the reaction to the film in Peru. What has been the reaction to the story, the kind of the
Hmm.
meta part of the story, that period of time in Peruvian history, and
Hmm.
just the general reaction to the film?
I mean, it's been amazing. The film came out in Sundance and then went to Berlin and then went to Locarno. So I've been there, presenting the film. And only after Locarno, I flew to Lima because we had the premiere there in August. And so I was kind of like used to have like an audience that was discovering, right? Something, a country, a culture, history, the history of a country, the political history, of a conflict. Suddenly, when I showed it in Peru for the first time, it was actually a very big theater as well. It was part of the Festival de Lima, and it was sold out. And what was very intense is that people around me, they didn't discover, they remember. And that was very intense because the 90s was yesterday. It's not long ago. I remember, obviously I made a film out of this. And even if there were some, kids 20 years old, or they have parents who have told them, because it's such a big part of Peruvian history. So a lot of people were like, oh, wow, little details. We created little details with a lot of passion, because I think it's all about the details in the film that you can actually tell some things, right? So, the sugar, uh, the brands that we had there, everything was from the 80s and the 90s. And only in Peru they actually saw this. So that was very intense. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to show this film in Peru. Absolutely. But it was also beautiful to be able to show it, in three other places, like, Sundance and Berlin and Locarno, because I feel that's when I started realizing that my very personal film and intimate film, well, people were making a connection and it was universal, something that I didn't know before.
I mean, it's easy to see why people connect with it. And
Hmm.
uh, it is because of the characters. We've been talking a lot. I've been talking a lot about the characters and the way that they interact with one another. It doesn't feel like anything is forced in the film in terms of these relationships and the actions that they take. Of course, a young woman would, at a period, a very critical period in her time, would see that love would conquer all. She thought that
Hmm.
no matter what, and the adults in the room are trying to tell her, maybe something otherwise. And of course, these are things that I can imagine most, if not all, families have gone through some version of what we see in the film, and
Hmm.
so I can see where the connection would come in. And yeah, again. I want to go back to what you're just sort of alluding to in terms of the recognition that the film has received.
Hmm.
You mentioned
Hmm.
Sundance there, and also the Audience Award winner at the Locarno Film Festival. Won Best Director at the Berlin International Film Festival at the Grand Prix, and I guess that's part of the category Grand Prix generation.
Hmm.
You are also,
Exactly, yeah.
and also interestingly, you are
Hmm.
Switzerland's entry into the Oscar submission for Best International Feature Film at this year's Academy Awards. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Switzerland is like the main country of production of Queens, mainly because I am also Swiss. I'm Peruvian, but I am also Swiss. I live in Switzerland. And so the majority of the funding came from Switzerland, from actually public funding. And then we had public funding from Peru and then from Spain. So it was clear for me that all of the actors were, mostly going to be Peruvian. We have Susi Sanchez, who's from Spain and who makes a wonderful job with the Peruvian accent. And we have a couple of actors who have the double nationality. There was no way that in this story there was going to be, Swiss actors because it has nothing to do with Switzerland. What we're talking about, most of the head of the departments they were Swiss because we needed when you get public funding from an European country or a South American country, which is like how you make films when you're not in America, you have to actually make people from the country work in the project.
Which makes
That's the deal,
Yeah,
right?
that makes a lot of
That
sense.
makes sense. Exactly. And so I don't think we had enough points, anyways, to be the Peruvian entry because we had so many people behind the camera that were, Swiss and also Spanish, so Europeans that, had to be there because I had so many people in front of the camera that were Peruvians. So we had to like balance the thing. Uh, the film basically was more Swiss than anything else. So that's one thing. But of course, then that Switzerland decided that this film in Spanish, shot entirely in Peru by a director who is both Swiss and Peruvian, is their choice to, send to the Oscars. That was kind of amazing. And I think that shows, some very strong, open-minded Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, I was very honored. I am very honored that the country thinks this is the film that represents them. It's amazing. I think it's beautiful.
I do too, and I could spend a whole show on
Hmm.
just the idea of public funding for filmmakers. The United, as you
Yes,
alluded to, the United States is brutal in terms of trying to get that kind of funding. I don't know if it
yes.
exists actually in this country. Maybe there are pockets of of some part of the filmmaking world that I'm not aware of, but almost everything is privately funded or by some production company from wherever. To infer or bury the lead here, the film is worthy of submission for all kinds of awards, and it's good to see that Switzerland and your cooperation with all of the things that you just described played out in the way that it did. And it's a testament to international support for filmmaking as opposed to so much, not the dearth of it here in the United States, and it points that out as well.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, very welcome. Again, the film is called Queens, or if you are hearing our discussion internationally, Reinas. And once again, our guest today, co-writer and director Klaudia Reynicke.
Thank you, Mike.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.